Okay, so today we're going to be talking about Aristotle's response to Parmenides, right? So once again, recall Parmenides has a solution to the problem of change, namely that there are no changes because everything that exists is all actually just one thing, right? When we talk about being, we have to refer to everything that exists and all that exists is just one thing, right? So you'll recall from last week that Parmenides gives the following argument for his position. So the idea is that being is, right? Being exists, things exist. Only what can be thought can exist. Nothing, the concept nothing, cannot ever be thought. So that means given that we can never think thoughts, and given that, or excuse me, given that we can never think nothing, and given that only what exists can be thought, that means that nothing exists. Look, that means that nothing does not exist. Excuse me. Um, so nothing does not exist, which um, that means that there's no difference between me and the coffee mug, right? We're actually the same thing. And so is the space between us. Because we might think that, oh, yeah, I'm different than the coffee mug because there's nothing in between us, right? And so that makes me a distinct thing from the coffee mug. Where Parmenides' point is that no, there is no nothing. And so that means that there's no difference between me and the coffee mug. Okay, so premise five, the only viable candidate for something existing besides being is nothing, right? And so that means that being is all there is. Okay, and given that being is all that there is, that means that there's only one thing that exists, not multiple things that we think of when we think of like things existing, right? Okay, so this is Parmenides' argument. Now, he thinks that being is immutable, right? It doesn't change. Uh, if if it were to say move or if it were to change, that would be a contradiction because that would mean that there's a place where being is not, right? And where being is not is nothing. But we already said that nothing doesn't exist. So that means that there is no changes. There are no changes in the world. That means that being does not change. So even though, like when we watch a cocoon open up and a butterfly come out, we think that there's some kind of change going on there. There's no changes going on there. It's all steady, stable, and unchanging, according to Parmenides. Okay, so let's get to Aristotle's response. So Aristotle wants to say that we're equivocating, or Parmenides is equivocating over the term being in his argument. Okay, so let's imagine the following cases, right? So let's talk about, or let's think about a rock's inability to be courageous. Okay, so um, a rock, just given the kind of thing that it is, cannot be courageous, right? A rock cannot have the predicate of is courageous. It lacks that, right? There's something about the rock that makes it unable to ever be courageous, ever, 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 ever. Now, let's talk about um, an infant, Socrates, that infant has the potential to become courageous, right? So if we have a baby and, the baby doesn't really know anything, and we say, well, maybe this baby will be a courageous person one day. We could totally say that. We could talk about the baby's potential, right, to become something that it could be, right? Now we couldn't, maybe we wouldn't talk about Socrates, the baby Socrates' potential to fly, right, because humans don't fly, or to teleport, right? So kind of like the rock, the baby can't. lacks some things, right? It just can't do everything, but it does have the potential to become courageous. Um, and so this is an example of what Aristotle calls potential being, right? So, um, so let's just stick to baby Socrates. Baby Socrates has a number of potentialities that baby Socrates can actualize at some point, right? And so this notion of potential being is going to be how Socrates responds to Parmenides. Now, let's talk about what Aristotle calls actual being. So let's think about the adult Socrates actually being courageous. Okay, so we have a difference between potential being and actual being on the one hand. So when Socrates is courageous or is being courageous, that's an example of an actualized potential. Okay. And so there are two different kinds of being, namely potential being and actual being. And so what we do is we actualize our potentials. Okay. And so that's limited to the kind of creature that we are, right? So I can't actualize my potential to teleport, right? Because kind of like the rock being courageous, I'm just not the kind of thing that can teleport. Okay. And so that's a kind of like non-being. But here we have a difference between potential being and actual being. Now, so using the distinction between potential and actual being, um, we can show that, or Aristotle's going to try to show that being can change, unlike what Parmenides concludes. So let's return to interpreting Parmenides's argument in light of this new distinction between actual being and potential being. Okay, so let's imagine that. So the first argument, recall, let's go back real quick. The first argument says that being is. That's the first. That's the first premise of the argument. Now we might wonder, the term being here, does he mean potential being or does he mean actual being? Okay, so we can go back and let's suppose that he means actual being is. Okay, so premises 2 through 4 don't change, right? So only what can be thought exists, nothing cannot be thought. And so that means that nothing does not exist. Um, but then premise 5 changes. And so the only viable candidate for something existing besides actual being is nothing, i.e., the only viable referent for being other than actual being is nothing. Okay, and so what we're doing is we're using one of our distinguished terms to identify what being means or what sense of being we mean in this argument. Okay, so it follows from 5 and 4, that's 6. Therefore, actual being is all there is. The only viable referent for being is actual being. Now, what this interpretation gets us is that premise 5 is false. Okay, so it says that the only viable candidate for something existing besides actual being is nothing, right? So we have actual being and we have nothing, and that's what we're stuck with. But that's false because we have actual and potential being and nothing. So that means that this version, or if we interpret Parmenides' argument in this way, it's false, right? Premise 5 is false. And so that means that the argument doesn't work. Okay. So here's one way in which we can read what Parmenides says. And so if we read them this way with one distinction or one prong of the distinction in mind, we get a bad argument with a false premise. Okay. And so secondly, we could read being to mean actual or potential being. So we could say that being actually or potentially is. Okay. Just like the last argument, premises 2 through 4 don't change. So they just conclude that nothing does not exist. Um, the only viable candidate for something existing besides actual or potential being is nothing. Okay, that seems true, right? So if we have actual or potential being, right, the only candidate for something existing besides those two things is nothing, right? So premise 5 seems true. Therefore, actual or potential being is all there is. That seems like um, a plausible way to end this argument. But what we get is, if this is what Parmenides means by being, then his later conclusion, namely that being is immutable and there is no change, is false, right? So if being can mean potential being, then it can change. And so if something is potentially F, right? So suppose that I am potentially courageous, then that something can become F. So imagine that I can become courageous, and that's a change. That's a change. So, um, so basically, the core idea that you need to take away from this, right? So, don't be quite as worried about the details of how Aristotle gets to the conclusion, but namely that when we bring up the distinction between actual being and potential being, then the argument here doesn't work, because the distinction between potential and actual being means that being can change. It can become one thing, uh, or it can lose that thing and become a potential, right? So it goes back and forth. So Parmenides, a solution to the problem of change, ends up not working, right? Because there is change. There are things that change, right? If we take into account this distinction. So this is how Aristotle attempts to respond to Parmenides.